All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm really excited to have everybody here, including a couple new people who just joined. Gilberto from Mexico, Peter from Massachusetts. Oh, that's near us. Cool. All right, so today I want to talk to you about breaking bad habits. I don't know if you've been following Pavlok for very long, but it's the core of our mission is to help cure the world of bad habits, and it's really deep for me. A lot of my friends have suffered from bad habits and addictions. I myself have suffered from bad habits ever since I was a kid. And the creation of Pavlok is really just an extension of my desire to help myself and in the same time help the world. So I'm going to start off by telling a quick story about a friend of mine named Leo. Leo is a friend of mine from a while back, and he used to live in a small island called Guam. And he worked at a government job that wasn't particularly difficult, but it wasn't very fun. And Leo had a lot of bad habits. He found himself overweight. He found himself smoking cigarettes. He found himself eating junk food. And he had 5 kids. And he just wasn't able to imagine a life doing anything differently. As he continued to work at this job, he once found that he couldn't even keep up with his 5-year-old kid. And he was out of breath, and he felt that something needed to change. Now, Leo had tried for years to get over this problem. He'd always had New Year's resolutions come and go, and he just never stuck through with it. But this year he decided to make a different sort of change, a very small one. He said, rather than promising I'm going to lose weight or go to the gym every single day for the rest of my life, I'm going to do something very small. Instead of eating junk food whenever I have the urge to do junk food, as soon as I experience that urge for junk food, I'm going to do 10 push-ups. And then I can still eat that junk food if I want, but I'm going to at least interrupt that pattern and add 10 push-ups. Well, what do you think happened to Leo? It was a very small change, right? But what happened was that he suddenly found that he was able to rewire that trigger, that over the next few days and weeks, whenever he had the urge to eat junk food, he started to do those push-ups, and after he did those push-ups, he no longer wanted to eat that junk food. And after 1 month, he discovered that he just didn't have the desire at all to do junk food. So he said, all right, next month, let's try something different. I'm going to, whenever I have the desire to smoke a cigarette, I'm going to grab a glass of water and take a drink of it, and then take a quick walk, and then I can smoke a cigarette. And it turns out that exactly the same thing happened. He stopped desiring to smoke that cigarette. Leo managed to reroute and rewire the habits within his brain. And it made him, over the next year, grow a business that became enormous. He was able to quit eating junk food, lost a lot of weight, and was even able to quit his job and move with his family all the way to San Francisco. He now lives in California. So at the core of this is the habit. What made Leo do what he did every day? What made him so fat and so unhealthy at the beginning and then become so healthy after a while? And the root of the cause is actually based upon the question of what a habit is. What is a habit? A habit is when it takes more effort to not do something than to do something. A habit is when something is just completely automatic in your brain. And I think about this a lot when I use the computer, when I have my little bad habits. I used to use the internet all the time, and I'd waste a lot of time on Facebook. And it's funny about it, I never actually went to Facebook. I just found myself on Facebook. I'm sure you guys can count very easily the number of times that you'll go to Facebook and it's slow to load, so you'll close the tab and instantly and automatically open up a new tab and instantly start opening up another tab of Facebook. It's crazy how that happens. But that's because your brain gets so used to doing something so many times that it becomes harder for it to not do that thing than for it to do that thing. So when habits are stored so deeply in the brain, how do we actually get ourselves to break a bad habit? This is one of those questions that it's almost unanswered. If you Google it or you look around and you try to find, you're going to see that people will tell you a lot of different options, like, start slow, use substitution methods. But there's no real concrete exact answer because habits are such a difficult problem to solve. And current solutions to break bad habits just don't work. So fewer than 5% of smokers who quit are smoke-free a year later. Alcoholics relapse repeatedly, and sugar addiction is a leading cause of obesity in the US. The root of the problem comes from this. Our reptile brain, which is powered by instinct, controls most of what we do. It's very interesting when I started to learn about this triangle brain theory, where you have a prefrontal cortex. That's where thought lives. It's where consciousness lives. It's where language lives. And you have a reptile brain. And that's towards the back of your brain. It's where your basal ganglia is. It's where habits are stored. And that location, that reptile brain, is very similar in structure to the brain of a reptile, hence the name. But the funny thing about it is that that brain doesn't understand language. It lives in the present. It understands only a couple things. It knows that it likes pleasure. It knows that it hates pain. And that's it. Those are the only languages it understands. So when you try to tell yourself, or when people who are trying to quit smoking tell themselves, no, don't smoke. I don't need to smoke. Tomorrow I'll do it. What's happening is it's like someone trying to tell an animal to not do something, but the animal just doesn't understand those words. The example I always give is, imagine trying to tell a 2-year-old, don't eat sugar because you're going to get diabetes when you're 30. The 2-year-old doesn't understand what that means. Why would the 2-year-old respect that sentence? The 2-year-old just knows that it likes the taste of the sugar. But if every time the 2-year-old reaches for the sugar, you push his hand away, and he continues to reach for the sugar and you push his hand away, the 2-year-old will start to understand that there's actually a negative consequence for reaching for that sugar, and it learns. And that's the depth of the problem, that we try to tell ourselves what to do, but the person we're talking to doesn't understand language. So as I learned a lot about this, I tried to figure out how we could solve this problem. And what really blew my mind was the discovery of a type of science, a method, extremely common, but now forgotten. There was once a solution in America for curing addictions and curing bad habits, but that method disappeared. This method is called aversive conditioning. Now, the word is sad. The word sounds sad. The word aversion, I'm sure, is not a pleasant word. But the crazy thing is that it's been tested and trialed and clinically proven in hundreds of studies. And here's just a collection of 4 of them that I found. Up to 61.4% of subjects quit smoking with 5 days of aversive conditioning. Compare that to the act of trying to quit smoking cold turkey, which is a 5% success rate. Or even worse, Nicorette patches, which have a 7.5% success rate, yet cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. In this experiment alone, pack-a-day smokers were given just 5 days of 20 minutes a day conditioning, and a year later, fewer than half of them had smoked a single cigarette again. In another study, 81.8% of nail biters had significant growth with aversive conditioning. In this third study, people were taught to come in and choose a particular item of food they wanted to quit, and they were given that food while also associating that with a negative smell. And a year later, they checked the control group who had gained weight versus the testing group who had lost 9.17 pounds and maintained it a year later. And lastly, you'll see here skin scratching and hair picking. These obsessions and obsessive compulsions are extremely difficult to destroy. They're one of the most common types of disorders in America, yet in just a few 20-minute sessions with aversive conditioning, they disappeared. Now, aversive conditioning, you might be wondering, where did it go? If it's so effective, if it's clinically trialed, what happened? It disappeared for social reasons. It actually disappeared in 1994. Before 1994, it was a pretty common type of therapy with a lot of studies that were done upon it. But in 1994, there was a study that was promoted. It was a study that was done that showed a negative side of aversive conditioning. And it was an unsuccessful experiment that became a huge media press storm. It led to a large series of articles written around the newspapers, and it led to every single clinic being closed in America. It led to complete destruction of university funding and government funding, and it led to the loss of aversive conditioning. In the meantime, America became a positive psychology nation where everybody can only be told good things, where kids can only be complimented. Every kid gets a trophy for showing up. There's no room anymore in America for any sort of aversive conditioning because we have to be pleasant and nice, and there's no place for punishment anymore. And while I'm sure that you've heard many stories about positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement and how positive works better than negative, the fact is you can't swing a pendulum too far one way. If there's no bad, then what is good? So aversive conditioning disappeared from America for social reasons until now. Now, this is sort of interesting. Pavlok, when I built it, was not designed to be an aversive conditioning device. I didn't know what aversive conditioning was. It was designed to be a novelty device that would help me get off Facebook. But when we found these studies, the ones that I showed you a little bit above, I realized that we had stumbled on something big. So you've seen this before. This is what Pavlok looks like. Yeah, and this is Pavlok. It's a slight little module. It's worn and clipped to. It's worn around your body. It can be worn on a wristband. But Pavlok is part of a system. It's not a device. It's part of a system designed to break bad habits and help bring aversive conditioning to you. Over the last few weeks, we've been running a class, a class we've been hosting on off of Pavlok.com. We've had about 1,600 students who have been using not actually using a Pavlok, but using our methods and they're using our methods in order to try to break bad habits. And we found that the point of what we're doing is not about selling product. It's about really changing the world and helping people get control of their bad habits. And it doesn't always require an electric zapping wristband. So what we found over the last few weeks, and especially over the last week when we've been running the course, is that without the Pavlok itself, it's really important to have a good understanding of where your habit is. So we found a quick 3-step process that you can use to start to break your bad habits. First of all, in step 1, you need to break down your habit into a trigger, an action, and a reward. So habits are composed of 3 parts. The trigger is the reminder. It's the thing that makes you notice that you want to do that habit, for good habits or for bad habits. For me, when I used to live in Beacon Hill in Boston, and I walked to work. And as I walked to work, I would pass by a gym. I signed up for that gym, and I ended up going to that gym every single day because I walked by it on my way to work. That was my trigger. Yet I moved apartments 6 months later, and suddenly that gym was no longer on my walk, and I never went back again. I maintained paying it for several months, but I never went back to that gym again. The trigger was gone. Now, the action is the actual habit that you do, and it's important that you break that action down into its composite parts when you do the aversive conditioning. But in general, the action itself is the bad habit or the good habit that you're trying to get rid of. And lastly, the reward. It's the reinforcement. It's the reason why you're doing that habit. Now, for some, it's to scratch an itch. And I mean that in the same sense of just removing that bad feeling, like when you're smoking and you want to get rid of that feeling of wanting to smoke. That's the reward at one point, the nicotine high in a sense. For other things, it can be social pleasure. I've seen that if you're familiar with the book Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg, the author, talks about how he had a bad habit of standing up every day around 3 p.m. and walking and eating a cookie. And he discovered that it wasn't the cookie he desired. It was the standing up, walking around, and having social interaction in the kitchen. So all he did was he got up and he started having a talk with friends, and he got over the act of eating the cookies. We found that step 1 was important to break down that habit so you know what you're dealing with. In step 2, we would research and discovered a lot of and created worksheets based on cognitive behavioral therapy, where we help people find exactly what those habits, what drives that habit, and helps give you a rational sense of what you're doing. Those 2 steps, followed by aversive conditioning, is a very powerful way to break the habit at the root. So I'll briefly go through these 3 steps. I did just talk about this quite a bit, but this is the habit loop: the trigger, the action, and the reward. A trigger is, again, something that reminds you to break a bad habit. And it reminds you to do the habit. It's that thing that causes the action to be completely automatic. And one way to start rewiring a bad habit is to start by adjusting the trigger. Like I mentioned, I walked by a gym in order to go to the gym. You could remove unhealthy foods from your refrigerator and just not have them, and then drive a different way home from work so you don't pass by the grocery store in order to remove that trigger. You can also adjust the action, and you can adjust the reward. To adjust the action, you can try doing substitutions as a trick. So, for example, I used to have a bad habit of eating about a pint of ice cream every night. And my trainer then told me to replace those with frozen berries. I still received the reward of the cold sensation and the sweet sensation, but I substituted a different action that gave me that same reward. Those are very effective ways to start breaking your bad habit. Now, secondly, this is the CBT worksheets I mentioned. Um, these are worksheets. You can find some online. You can find some different worksheets. I'll be telling you how you can get them from us a little bit later in this presentation. But these worksheets are sort of a way for you to be rational about the habit that you're doing. It gives you a way to take a moment, take a breath, see yourself from a third person perspective, and be able to see how that habit, that behavior, that routine affects you in your daily life. See how you see the things that you're doing and the reasons why you're doing it, and really get it down on paper so you're able to look at that and review it, and it's not just a thought, but it's written. And then lastly is the aversive conditioning. So aversive conditioning is it's a method of classical conditioning where I'm going to break that for a second. It's a method of classical conditioning where you associate a slightly uncomfortable stimulus with the undesired bad habit, so that your brain, your reptile brain, that part of your brain that doesn't understand language, begins to associate those two together. It begins to combine them. Kind of like Pavlov's dogs with the steak and the salivation. You can imagine the opposite, getting rid of nail biting with a snap of a rubber band, because your brain starts to associate the uncomfortable feeling of the rubber band with the act of biting its nails. Now, aversive conditioning is a very powerful method, and it's not even very difficult to do. For step one, for 5 days, you'll simply imagine yourself doing the bad habit. I found that by using those cognitive behavioral therapy worksheets, you can really break down habits into composite parts, and you can start to imagine yourself doing these bad habits in individual steps and adding an aversive as you do each of those steps. Then step two is to continue to add that aversive whenever you do the habit. I often recommend that for the 5-day period, you do these imagination experiments for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you actually force yourself to do the unhealthy action, to eat the unhealthy food or to bite those nails, but you have to add that aversive while you do it. And lastly, after 5 days, whenever you aim to completely remove that bad habit completely, and whenever you have the urge to do the bad habit, then you add the aversive back in. So actually, I want to ask you guys right now, does that make sense? Is there anything confusing? Does that make sense about how the whole aversive conditioning process works? Cool. So one person's wondering if Pavlok can help if you're unable to identify the trigger for why you pull your hair. Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great question. So with regards to the aversive conditioning, with what I'm talking about right now, we found that, let me take a step back. You're asking if it's necessary that you know the triggers before you and do the worksheets and understand the thoughts and triggers behind your hair pulling before you actually do the hair pulling. And my answer to that is Pavlok will work, but CBT wouldn't work for that sort of habit. And the reason for that is this. With aversive conditioning, you're simply making yourself aware. The first step is to add that aversive and actually force yourself to do that unhealthy action. And as you do that action, your brain starts to associate the two and stops liking to do it very much. So as you start to do that the first day and the second day, by day 3, almost all of our users who have those automatic body habits like nail biting or hair picking, or hair pulling or skin picking, by day 2 or day 3, about up to 90 to 100% of them say that they are aware when they do that habit. The first step is awareness. You need to break yourself out of the pattern of just doing it because it's on your body and start noticing. So for something like that, if you can't identify the triggers or you just don't notice when you're doing it, the first step would be aversive conditioning. You would start off with doing the aversives. Cool. So someone's asking about smoking. How would this work? So with smoking, smoking is one of my favorite to help with because it's such a massively bad habit. There's nothing good about it, and there's just such an endemic destructive act. And we're quite good at breaking smoking addiction. With the Pavlok wristband itself, we recently did a study at University of Massachusetts, Boston, where we had a small pilot group try to quit smoking by smoking cigarettes for 10 days while using a Pavlok. And they were pack-a-day smokers, and after 10 days, there was a complete 75% cessation rate. And then we checked again 3 months later, and this was pretty cool. The next person had quit, so we had a negative recidivism rate, which was pretty cool. So your question though about how would you use this 3-step process for quitting smoking? Well, in step one, you would want to break down your smoking habit into the trigger, the action, the reward. So when do you smoke? Where are you when you smoke? Why are you smoking? The best way to identify this is using our automatic behavior tracking method. We have this habit tracking worksheet where you're able to, it's very simple. I mean, it's just whenever you start to smoke, you'll write down where you are, what you're thinking about, how you're feeling, and then you'll go out and smoke. There's no problem there. That you'll start to notice some triggers, the time of the day or people around you when you want the cigarette. Secondly, you would break down that action into the multiple composite parts. So you'd think about the motion of the hand, the reaching into your pocket to grab the cigarette, pulling out the box of cigarettes, opening up the pack. Then after that, you could use aversive conditioning. So you'd imagine yourself doing those steps of the habit and snapping a rubber band or using Pavlok zap at each step. After a few days, you'll start to notice the desire and the craving dissipates. Okay. Let's continue going through this. Cool. So here's a couple examples. Marty quit smoking with Pavlok. He was our first user of Pavlok to quit smoking, and it's really cool to have him do it. He used Pavlok for 5 or 6 days to quit smoking, and then he actually maintained 1 cigarette a day that he would zap himself for like 3 months, but he didn't even want it anymore. He just kept doing it. So I told him, "Hey, when are you gonna get rid of that cigarette?" He's like, "Oh, I'll try it tomorrow." And he got rid of it, and he never smoked again. And I met Marty recently and asked him to smoke a cigarette, and he physically couldn't get the cigarette to his mouth. It was impossible for him to do that. It was it's the same way I felt. I used it on tortilla chips for myself, for Tostitos, the blue bag of tortilla chips. And for 5 days, I zapped myself whenever I ate a chip. And it was pretty cool because until this day, it's been 8 months now, I get a little anxious and a little slightly ill whenever I look at a tortilla bag, whenever I see that blue bag of Tostitos at a grocery store. And someone gave me a bowl of them once, and I tried to touch it, but I couldn't get my hand to physically. It was like a force field. It was crazy. I couldn't get my hand to touch it. Nagina quit nail biting, and she did the same way. She used it by biting her nails and zapping herself for 3 or 4 days, and then she used a thought-based positive method where she bit her nails and zapped herself, bit her nails and zapped herself, and then thought of the person she was becoming and thought of who she could be and thought about what a difference that would make. And mentally, she thought of the negative version of herself and she thought of the positive version of herself. And she used a zap to fight the negative version and to merge those 2 images until only the positive remained. It was a mental structure, but it really, really helped her. So one more question. I'll go do one more question and then follow through here. So working on breaking more than one habit at a time, carbs and diet pop. I always that's you can phrase that as unhealthy eating, or you can phrase that as 2 specific items. You could just say that's junk food, right? So you could try to break the habit of unhealthy eating, but that's different than creating an aversion towards diet soda. If you wanted to actually never drink diet soda again, you would probably want to focus on diet soda. And my recommendation would, of course, be to choose one. And it's only 5 days, right? So just do one for a week. All right. So I quickly wanted to talk about our goal at Pavlok, what we're trying to do with this company. And one of our core goals is to break 10 million habits in the next 10 years. We want to break 10 million habits by 2025. And I've been realizing more and more that, number one, the Pavlok is an extremely effective product. The zap of the Pavlok is more effective than any aversive that exists, and it's optimized for individual people, and it's optimized for individual habits, and it is the best way that presently exists in the world to use aversive conditioning to break a bad habit. But it is a little expensive for some people, and it's also not the only way to break a bad habit. There are other ways, and some people also just don't like the feeling of the electric zap. So for those people, we wanted to still be able to help them break the bad habit. At our company right now, I'm sitting with my team, and we have only one KPI. That's key performance indicator, and that KPI is number of habits broken. And so for that reason, we've been speaking about this back and forth for a while. I really wanted to create something that could be more affordable to really help anybody, even if you're not ready for Pavlok or you're afraid of a zapping device, to really help you break that bad habit. And secondly, I also wanted to help. I wanted to test and create different ways and methods because I know that each person is not the same as each other person. Um, so what we did, and Eddie just asked that without the Pavlok device or using a rubber band, can you use it? Can you use a rubber band? And that's what I'm trying to get to. That there is a way to break a bad habit, regardless of where you are or who you are. So what we did is we created a bad habit digital package. Over the last week or so, we've been doing a course where we've been using a lot of the contents that are in this package and testing it on our users, and they've had insane results. I want to show you what they say. Actually, maybe I can read you some the survey results. I'm going to get the survey results open in a moment so I can show you some people who went through the aversive sessions that we just read this morning. It was actually really, really nice. We created this bad habit package, which is a complete system designed to help you end your bad habit permanently. And I wanted to make something that was really useful and totally valuable. But I also know, just based on the data that we've done this week, that when you offer something completely for free, nobody ever sticks through with it. So I wanted to figure out the right balance where there's something valuable that people will actually stick through and use with a good system. So right now I'm right now reading a few of the results from. We asked the question yesterday. People were going through their first aversive training audio session, and we asked people to answer a survey after they went through their first 10-minute package. And so I feel empowered to be able to kick this sugar addiction, said one person. I feel enlightened and optimistic. When doing the habit, I felt strong. I gained confidence when thinking of who I want to become. One person says, rubber bands hurt more than they should. Another person said, I felt comfortable and with that sensation that my bad habit can fade away definitely. It was really cool to see the results of people using a non-Pavlok method to quit their bad habit. So getting back to this, what we did is we created a really cool package that I think is very powerful, and I wanted to offer to you today the first time we're offering this package. It's a digital package. It's a digital course with quite a bit of goodies in there. It's 5 detailed lessons based on the course we've been giving over the last week. They will walk you through exactly the step-by-step process to break your habit. Secondly, there's CBT worksheets that you can use to analyze your habit. We've created them so they're editable PDFs. You can print them out and write on them, or you can edit them directly on your computer. Next, we created aversive training audio sessions for specific habits. In the course, we created only an generalized break a bad habit audio file, but now I'm creating several ones for smoking, nail biting. Nail biting is the same as hair picking and hair pulling, unhealthy eating, and procrastination. We also have 4 interviews with some really cool experts. So Dr. Daniel Party, who is a sleep and willpower researcher from Stanford University, he talks a lot about the effects of sleep upon your body. We have Dr. Roy Baumeister, who's basically the inventor of the word willpower. He discovered willpower as a resource. He's been focused on willpower for like the last 30 years. I was so impressed that I was so happy that he was willing to even do an interview with me. Dr. Calvin Newport, who's a professor and a researcher, I believe, at George Washington University, and he talks a lot about deep learning on the act of becoming an expert, on the 10,000 hours to become an expert. And lastly, James Clear, who's a writer and a researcher on habits and psychology, and he's very smart about the act of forming a habit. And lastly, we're also including a cool book. It's an ebook I wrote called Habit Change, Theory and Practice. This focuses a lot more on forming the habit. And we found this to be, it's a good book. Threw it in there for you. So in total, you're getting 5 detailed lessons. You get the CBT worksheets. You get the aversive training audio sessions, 4 interviews with experts, and this habit change theory and practice ebook. And I built it for just $99, which I think is a pretty fair price. I know if I go lower, people won't actually stick through with the course. But I also wanted to offer people who don't have a Pavlok to be able to get the Pavlok and the course for $249. And just for right now, while we're on the call, if you decide to buy it, it'll only be $199. So if you, for the price of just a Pavlok itself costs $199. You'll get the entire course package and a Pavlok for no extra charge. If you're interested in buying it, I'd ask you right now to head over to pavlok.com/now, and you'll be able to see this package and buy it right now. So I'd recommend you head over there right now. I'll give everybody a second to click that link or to type into their web browser, pavlok.com/now, and then I'll give you a minute to go over that URL. And then now I'm free to answer any questions you might have about the package or about aversive conditioning. So one person asks why, with hair pulling being a less common habit, have you tracked statistics for how Pavlok has been for each bad habit? After 7 years of trying to stop, I fear that nothing will help me, but I don't want to give up. The truth is, we know that based on the old clinical research that things that are hand-based motions, so items like nail biting or skin picking or trichotillomania, hair pulling, they are the easiest to cure with aversive conditioning, with electric zappers, because of the way that it's we found that the type of therapy that you use, the type of aversive that you use is directly correlated with the type of habit. Because the electric stimulation is based upon your arm and even the same arm, it's more effective than any other type of aversive. So for you, I'd recommend, if you don't have a Pavlok right now, start off with a rubber band. Just take a day and just start snapping it whenever you catch yourself. What about those who already have bought a Pavlok? Do we get a discount on the course? If you've already bought a Pavlok and you buy the course, I will give you a $20 discount. Just shoot me an email at manish@pavlok.com and I will send you a $20 refund. So another person asked the same question. You absolutely can get a discount. It's a $20 discount. Just email me after you buy it. So how does this work for oversleeping? Well, oversleeping is not quite the same as a bad habit. It has to do with your active sleeping. A lot of it has to do with the time you go to sleep and the way that you sleep well. That said, Pavlok itself, the device, is probably the world's best alarm clock. It just works. It zaps you when you want to be woken up, and it seems to be very powerful. One person mentions that it seems to be a bit hypocritical or funny that some users wouldn't use the Pavlok due to not liking the feeling of the zap. It's funny how that's true, right? Some people are just so afraid of pain, they're not able to do it. One person asks that they have not received their Pavlok and they still receive this since they haven't gotten the device yet. Your device is on the way. If you get the $99 package, we'll send you a $20 discount. And when the Pavlok is there, that'll just add extra strength to it. You'll learn about the system of how it works well before you get the Pavloks. Cool. All right, so I'm going to let everybody take another few minutes. Again, if you want that steep discount on the Pavlok plus the package for just $199, you'll need to go over right now before we close this webinar, because as soon as I close it, the price will increase to $249. Yeah, and so a couple of people are asking. A couple of people are asking me again about the $20 discount offer. If you've already ordered the Pavlok and you go, then head over to pavlok.com/now, buy the $99 package, and shoot me an email at manish@pavlok.com, and I will refund your $99 purchase by $20. All right. A couple of questions I'm getting about Pavlok, about the API. Is there the API? Is it available? Yes, it's available. We have the API running right now. It's of course in development to be better, but the API works. We have a repository for it. Feel free to email me, Yale. Happy to answer. One other person's asking for video testimonials. Feel free to check out our site. We've got tons of them. Is there ever a slippery slope concern where if you have a food aversion, it extrapolates to more food? I don't quite understand what you mean by that. The idea of the breaking of a bad habit of food won't lead to you eating other food. In fact, it tends to, as we showed in one of the studies above, here I'll pull it up right here in the presentation. The aversion study results in sustained weight loss of 9.17 pounds. That was based on a group of people quitting one type of food. And a year later, they had lost 9.17 pounds and maintained it. The idea, I think what is actually happening is it's just making you more aware of food in general. It makes you less completely automatic, makes you less likely to just want to eat the food. All right. One person, Eddie, asks about doing the aversion training while only imagining doing the habit or while you're actually doing the bad habit. Now, that's a great question, Eddie. So, in a few studies on smoking that I've read, we found that for people who had been smoking fewer than 20 years, who are newer smokers, the act of smoking at the same time as adding the electric zap was very effective, but it decreased in efficacy after about 20 years. And what they said the reason was because the habit had become so deeply ingrained in the brain that their hand was no longer making a decision to smoke a cigarette. It was just like breathing. It was like their hand just naturally, even deeper than a regular habit, continued to just smoke without it being it was anyway. So what they did for those people is that for older smokers is they had them do a pattern interrupt, the imagination zap followed by imagining the version of themselves in 50 years with an IV pump laying down helpless. That was more effective as a pattern interrupt. And when they did that, it was able to be carried over to their smoking sessions. So what we did with Pavlok is use both. We have you imagine and we have you do it while you're doing the action. The idea is you don't need to feel guilty about doing the action while you're doing your training. If you're going to do it, but just add the zap while you do it. One person asked about pornography, if Pavlok can be used and helpful to help quit pornography. We found I only have 3 or 4 case studies of people who have used it for pornography, but they've all told us the same thing, that it was extremely effective in the way that they used it. They basically said that at any step of the process, they would press the zap button. So when they opened up a website, they'd zap. Whenever they hovered their mouse over a video, they'd zap. Whenever they clicked it, they'd zap. Whenever they moved their mouse into like another video, they'd zap. Whenever they scrolled, they'd zap. And they said that what happened was by day 2 or day 3, they'd start to choose one video, and that was it. It wouldn't last for hours. And then over time, they completely removed it once and for all. So I have not tested that with the rubber band theory. I just know that it's been very effective with the Pavlok device. Okay, guys, there's been a lot of people here asking questions, and it's been a lot of fun. Um, a couple more questions I'll just answer, and then we're going to end it very shortly. Have you ever thought about using a remote control for the zapper? Yes, there is a remote control, and there's even an iWatch app, so you can zap from wherever you'd like. Um, as for everybody else, thank you so much. And it was a pleasure to chat. And if you have any other questions, feel free to join. I'll leave that pavlok.com/now discount for about 3 minutes up. So if you want to get the discount deal, head over right now and buy it. Otherwise, we'll see you on the other side. Thank you. Yeah.